The first thing I saw was the red bicycle lying beneath the maple tree, its front wheel still spinning even though no one was there to ride it. Behind it, my best friend's house stood blackened and hollow against the pale morning sky, with smoke leaking through broken windows like the last breath of something that had once been alive. A firefighter stopped me before I reached the driveway, but I already understood from the way he lowered his eyes. Grant Mercer was gone. His wife, Claire, was gone. Their 2 children, 12-year-old Tessa and 8-year-old Miles, were gone. In one terrible night, the family that had treated me like one of their own had vanished, and the final message Grant had sent me remained unopened on my phone. Before I tell you what that message contained, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, because sometimes one unanswered call can follow a person for the rest of his life. Grant and I had been best friends since we were 11 years old, when he found me sitting alone behind our school gym after my father had walked out on my mother and me. Grant did not ask embarrassing questions or offer the kind of sympathy that makes a wounded person feel smaller. He simply sat beside me, divided his sandwich in half, and stayed until the final bell rang. From that day forward, we were nearly inseparable. He was the fearless one who climbed trees too high, spoke up when someone was bullied, and believed every broken thing could be repaired with enough patience. I was quieter, careful, and always expecting people to leave. Grant became the exception. Through college, first jobs, failed relationships, and the slow arrival of adulthood, he remained the person I could call without explaining why I needed him. When he married Claire, she made room for me in their lives without hesitation. Their children called me Uncle Nolan, and every Sunday afternoon I sat at their kitchen table while Claire served too much food, Grant exaggerated old stories, Tessa rolled her eyes, and Miles tried to cheat at card games. Their home was the safest place I had ever known, but in the final months before the fire, Grant began to change. He stopped joking as easily. He missed our usual Saturday breakfasts and answered messages with brief, distracted replies. At first, I assumed his construction business was struggling, because he had recently lost 2 major contracts. Then he asked to borrow money. Grant had never asked me for anything larger than a ride or help moving furniture, so when he requested $20,000, I knew the problem was serious. I had the savings, but I hesitated. I had spent years building a small financial cushion after growing up with unpaid bills and eviction notices taped to our apartment door. The thought of losing that security frightened me more than I admitted. Grant promised he would repay me within 3 months, but when I asked what the money was for, he became defensive and said it was complicated. I told him I needed the truth before I could help. He accused me of judging him, and I accused him of treating our friendship like a bank account. We ended the conversation angry, both of us too proud to soften. 2 days later, Claire came to my office during lunch. Her face looked exhausted, but she tried to smile as she explained that Grant had discovered serious structural problems in several houses his company had renovated. A subcontractor had used defective electrical materials, and Grant feared the homes were unsafe. Reporting the issue would destroy his company, expose him to lawsuits, and possibly cost his employees their jobs, but staying silent could put families in danger. He needed money to begin emergency repairs before the problem became public. Claire said Grant had not told me because he was ashamed that he had trusted the wrong person. I felt my anger begin to collapse, but another part of me still believed he should have been honest. I told Claire I would speak to him. She thanked me, then paused at the door and said Grant had always believed I would come through when it mattered. Those words would later become a sentence I could never escape. That afternoon, Grant called 3 times while I sat in meetings. I silenced each call, intending to return it after work. At 5:16 p.m., he sent a message. I saw his name appear on my screen, but I was still hurt and wanted him to wait. I placed the phone face down and drove home beneath a sky heavy with clouds. Shortly after sunset, a storm moved across town. The night itself lasted only a few dark hours, but within them, lightning damaged a transformer near Grant's neighborhood. Investigators later concluded that a power surge traveled through the faulty wiring inside his house. The fire began behind a wall near the children's rooms. A smoke detector had been disconnected during recent repairs. By the time Grant and Claire woke, the hallway was filled with heat and smoke. Neighbors heard glass breaking and saw Grant trying to reach the second floor from outside. He went back into the burning house after Claire escaped through a kitchen window. She followed him moments later when she heard Miles crying. None of them came out again. The following morning, after standing behind the emergency barrier until my knees nearly gave way, I finally opened Grant's last message. It was not about money. It was not angry. He had written that he was sorry, that fear had made him proud, and that he wanted to meet the next morning to explain everything. He also said he had found evidence proving the subcontractor knew the electrical materials were defective before installing them. Grant planned to report the truth, even if it cost him his business. At the end, he wrote that Claire and the children loved me, that he loved me too, and that no argument could erase 25 years of brotherhood. The final line said, "Please answer when you can. I need my best friend." I read those words beside the ruins of his home as daylight spread across the neighborhood, and something inside me broke with a silence more violent than the fire. For months, I lived as though I had died with them but had somehow continued breathing. I attended 4 funerals beneath a bright spring sky and stood before 4 coffins while people called the tragedy unavoidable. I knew better. If I had answered Grant, perhaps I would have gone to his house. Perhaps I would have noticed the disconnected smoke detector. Perhaps he would have brought his family to stay with me while the wiring was inspected. My mind created 1,000 versions of that day in which everyone survived because I chose compassion instead of pride. I stopped visiting friends, ignored my mother's calls, and left my job because I could no longer sit in meetings where ordinary problems were treated like disasters. Every morning, I drove past the fenced remains of Grant's home and punished myself with the sight of it. I carried his final message like a verdict. The investigation eventually identified the subcontractor as Warren Pike, a man who had worked with Grant for 6 years. Records showed that Warren purchased cheap, uncertified wiring while billing Grant's company for approved materials. He had forged inspection documents and hidden complaints from electricians who questioned the supplies. When authorities confronted him, he denied responsibility and blamed Grant for failing to supervise the work. My grief transformed into rage. I attended every court hearing, sitting close enough for Warren to see me. I wanted him to look at the empty seats where the Mercer family should have been. I wanted punishment severe enough to make the world feel balanced again, even though nothing could restore what had been taken. During that period, I met Warren's daughter, 16-year-old Sadie Pike. She approached me outside the courthouse one sunny afternoon, trembling so badly she could barely hold the envelope in her hands. I assumed she had come to defend her father, and I nearly walked away. Instead, she gave me copies of emails Warren had tried to delete. The messages proved he knew the materials were dangerous. Sadie had found them on an old laptop and brought them to the prosecutor, even though doing so meant helping send her father to prison. She told me her mother had died years earlier, and Warren was the only parent she had left, but she could not protect him by sacrificing the truth. As she spoke, I realized tragedy had not chosen only one family. Sadie was losing hers too, not through fire but through the consequences of a man's choices. The evidence led Warren to plead guilty. He received a long prison sentence, but when the judge asked whether I wanted to address the court, the speech I had prepared no longer felt honest. I had planned to speak about hatred, recklessness, and the 4 lives he had destroyed. Instead, I looked at Sadie sitting alone behind him and thought about Grant. He had always believed that accountability and mercy could exist together. I told Warren that I would never excuse what he had done and that forgiveness did not erase responsibility. I also told him I refused to let his actions turn the rest of my life into another ruin. The words did not free me immediately, but they opened a small door inside the prison I had built around myself. After the trial, Sadie entered foster care because she had no close relatives willing to take her. I learned this from the prosecutor and tried to forget it. I told myself she was not my responsibility. Yet every time I pictured her sitting alone, I remembered Grant dividing his sandwich with a frightened boy behind a school gym. Kindness had once changed the direction of my entire life because someone chose not to walk away. I began visiting Sadie at the group home on Sunday afternoons. At first, our conversations were uncomfortable and brief. She carried guilt for her father's crimes as if she had committed them herself, while I carried guilt for a phone call I had not answered. Slowly, we understood that both of us were being crushed by responsibilities that did not truly belong to us. Sadie loved architecture and filled notebooks with sketches of houses designed around sunlight, open spaces, and safe materials. Grant would have admired her attention to every detail. With the approval of social services, I helped her apply to a technical design program. I attended parent meetings even though I was not her parent, brought lunch when she studied late, and taught her to drive in an empty church parking lot during bright weekend mornings. She challenged me when I withdrew into grief, and I reminded her that she was not defined by Warren's choices. Our healing did not happen in one dramatic moment. It arrived through ordinary daylight, grocery trips, school projects, missed turns, burned pancakes, and quiet conversations at the kitchen table. A year after the fire, the damaged houses renovated by Grant's company were repaired through an insurance settlement and a community fund. I contributed the money Grant had once asked to borrow, then added nearly all the savings I had spent my life protecting. Together with former employees from his company, I created the Mercer Safe Homes Foundation, which provided free electrical inspections and smoke detectors to struggling families. On the first inspection day, more than 50 volunteers gathered beneath a clear blue sky. Firefighters taught children how to plan escape routes, electricians examined aging homes, and Sadie handed out safety information she had designed herself. I stood in the middle of the crowd and realized Grant's final act had not been failure. He had chosen to expose the truth before the fire took him. His courage had simply needed someone else to carry it forward. 2 years later, Sadie asked me to attend her high school graduation. When her name was called, she crossed the stage wearing a small silver pendant containing 4 tiny stars. She had chosen them for Grant, Claire, Tessa, and Miles. After the ceremony, she placed her diploma in my hands and told me that the Mercer family had saved her life without ever meeting her. I could not speak for several moments. I had spent so long believing I had failed Grant completely that I had never considered the possibility that loving him after his death could still matter. Sadie did not replace the family I lost, and I never asked her to. She became something new, a reminder that grief can make room for another human being without betraying those who are gone. On the 3rd anniversary of the fire, Sadie and I visited the memorial garden built where Grant's house had once stood. The red bicycle had been restored and mounted beside a stone path, surrounded by white flowers and young maple trees. Sunlight moved across 4 engraved names while children played in a nearby park. I played Grant's final message one last time. For years, I had heard only the sentence asking for his best friend. That morning, I finally heard everything else: his apology, his love, his certainty that one argument could not erase a lifetime. I understood that Grant had not died believing I abandoned him. He had reached toward reconciliation because he trusted our friendship was stronger than one unanswered message. I deleted the recording from my phone, not because I wanted to forget him, but because I no longer needed to use his final words as a weapon against myself. I had confused guilt with loyalty, believing that suffering proved how deeply I loved the Mercer family. But Grant had never wanted me to live in pain. He had spent his life pulling people out of lonely places, and the best way to honor him was to do the same. I forgave Warren without pretending his crime was small. I forgave Sadie for nothing, because she had done nothing wrong. Most difficult of all, I forgave myself for being human, wounded, proud, and one phone call too late. Before this story ends, leave a meaningful comment about someone you wish you had forgiven sooner, or tell us what you believe true friendship means when regret and loss test the heart. Your words may help another person choose kindness before pride steals an opportunity that may never return. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey that I still miss Grant, Claire, Tessa, and Miles every day. Some mornings, grief returns without warning when I smell burned wood, hear a bicycle bell, or see a family laughing around a crowded table. But grief no longer tells me that my life ended with theirs. It reminds me that I was loved by people worth carrying forward. The truth still haunts me, but it no longer owns me. One unanswered message became the greatest regret of my life, yet the love behind that message led me toward Sadie, toward service, and toward a future I once believed I did not deserve. I lost my best friend and his entire family in one terrible night, but in the daylight that followed, I learned that forgiveness is not forgetting the fire. It is choosing to build something warm from the ashes.